When I originally wrote the script for the Lightsmith video, Blizzard hadn't yet announced their first drafts for any of the trees except the Keeper of the Grove and Chosen of Elune trees that they announced for Druids at BlizzCon. As of the time I'm writing this insert, which is December 19th, Blizzard announced about 4 other trees: Sand Lane for Death Knights, Mountain Thane for Warriors, Chronomancer for Evokers, and of course Lightsmith for Paladins. I'm still going to use the script I originally wrote for Lightsmith before I knew what Blizzard was doing, but once it's done, I'm going to insert some compare and contrast stuff of my ideas versus Blizzard's ideas. The Lightsmith tree is the first tree that I really fleshed out. Its flavor is easily deducible from the name. Crafting armor with your light magic implies that Lightsmith's flavor should be all about damage mitigation and damage prevention from your healing spells. With that context in mind, I decided that the shallowest talent should actually be Illuminated Healing. Before Legion came around and started making demands about where Paladins stand in terms of their mastery, Illuminated Healing was the Holy Paladin mastery. Targets that we healed got an absorb shield proportionate to how much we healed, and the higher our mastery stat, the bigger that proportion was. This iteration of Illuminated Healing might or might not be tied to our mastery rating. I figure that could go either way. But stacking an absorb shield is likely just as appealing for protection as it is for holy, so I figure this is a pretty solid choice for a mandatory starter talent. It also means that everything I do in this tree that buffs or provides healing also provides absorb shields, which is pretty cool. I think it was my decision to make this the root talent for Lightsmith that started me down the path of having a hero spec divining passive at the root of all 3 of my ideal talent trees. Moving on to Tier 2. Light of the Protector. This is an upgrade for Word of Glory. If you get this talent, then Word of Glory disappears from your spell bar and Light of the Protector appears in its place. It differs from Word of Glory in that it has a short 8-second cooldown, but its healing is boosted by 1% of the target's missing health. This was what Protection had for the few expansions that it didn't have Word of Glory, and I think that Word of Glory is a good spell to upgrade for both Holy and Protection. Now, in my earlier proto-draft, I had Judgment upgraded to apply damage shields to nearby allies. If I'm being honest, I did that just so I could pull the Diablo 3 Smite spell into Paladin's kit somehow. In retrospect, that was a dumb goal. I should be doing what works for Paladins in World of Warcraft, and sometimes that will be grabbing other spells from other genres, and sometimes it won't be. In this case, reviving an older ability is better. Word of Glory really is a good thing to upgrade for Lightsmith. And yes, Illuminated Healing means that the more the target gets healed for, the larger the absorb shield they'll get. Not bad, huh? In the middle, we've got Protector of the Innocent. This was actually a holy passive in Cataclysm that amounted to another healing spell, albeit one that you automatically cast on yourself whenever you heal someone else instead of a new button on your spell bar. What makes me call it another healing spell? Well, when I healed others and got healed myself, both the heal that I cast on someone else and the heal that was cast on me automatically due to this talent got mirrored to my beaconed target. I think other players might be beginning to see why Cataclysm was my favorite expansion. That aside, Leech was not an actual stat in the game back in Cataclysm. That didn't get added until Warlords of Draenor. Simply adding Leech to the game so that you get passive healing from just about everything you do seems like it would work great in Lightsmith, since it rewards you for healing others. Of course, there's more than one way to implement this. Receiving absorb shields on yourself for healing others or doing damage, having a heal over time on yourself that you refresh by healing others, the list goes on, but for the first iteration, I'm just keeping it simple. The next active ability, Shield Glare. This is one Diablo 3 Crusader ability that's sticking around, and why not? It deals damage, it heals allies who are in its area of effect, including you, so it's a self-heal, which kind of helps with Light of the Protectors on cooldown, and depending on what other buffs you pick, it can further help with damage mitigation for you and your party and raid. What's not to love here? I'd like to add that there is a bit of a caveat for this. For protection, Shield Glare replaces Shield of the Righteous, but Holy has this Denounce spell that already replaces Shield of the Righteous, turning it from a multi-target finisher to a single-target finisher. It doesn't really make sense to have this in place as a replacement for Shield of the Righteous and having Denounce unless they're set up in some kind of system that makes them mutually exclusive. And they're not set up in a system like that, so instead of replacing Shield of the Righteous for Holy, Shield Glare replaces Light of Dawn. In other words, Light of Dawn gets some multi-target damage and other perks with this upgrade. Of course, any Holy Paladins using this upgrade are locking themselves into either going sword or board or losing their multi-target heal. Now, if you picked Lightsmith, you're probably carrying a shield in your offhand anyway. On that note, I'd like to take an aside and say that I really, really hope that Blizzard implements Denounce as a PvE Holy talent instead of the PvP talent it currently is. They've currently locked Holy Paladins into going sword and board whenever they're soloing, while Denounce would break them out of that pigeonholing. But anyway, on to Tier 3. I think I'll go right to left on this tier since I just got done shocking about Shield Glare. The first passive is Sanctified Targe. I was going to call this Divine Verdict for a while, name it after another Diablo 3 Crusader rune for the Shield Glare spell. But I changed my mind. This one increases the healing and damage that Shield Glare does, but my first idea for this was that the damage mitigation that's normally a self-buff instead gets applied to enemies as a debuff to provide damage mitigation for your allies. But then I realized two things. Number one, the damage mitigation Shield of the Righteous gives you is increasing your armor. It doesn't make that much sense to apply a debuff to enemies that increases the effective armor of their targets. And number two, the other mutually exclusive talent that goes with Shield Glare also causes it to have more damage mitigation, so I've changed my mind. Instead, it buffs the direct healing Shield Glare does. Healing versus mitigation, a good talent choice to have in the Holy and Protection tree. I was going to call this Divine Verdict until I switched it to healing, then I went with something a little more holy-ish. And the other mutually exclusive upgrade is Emblazoned Shield. Allies who you heal with Shield Glare receive a buff that causes the next direct attack they receive to be mitigated as if you'd blocked it. Whatever mitigation you get from your shield, they receive. And if you have Holy Shield and can block spells, then this can mitigate a spell. Come to think of it, this is actually a pretty powerful damage mitigation tool for yourself, and come to think of it, this might be too powerful. I'm not sure. Then again, these are hero talents. They're supposed to be frickin' awesome. I think I need some feedback on this. Well, I need feedback on everything. I suppose that in order to make Sanctified Targe appealing enough to be compared to this, like guaranteed block on demand, I'll need to up its self-healing a bit. Of course, that makes Word of Glory nigh obsolete. Or does it with all the buffs that Light of the Protector gets? I am figuring this stuff out as I go, which is probably the right way to do things, come to think of it. In any case, in the center, the Tier 3 passive talent is Spiritual Attunement. And there's some interesting history behind this particular one. Back during vanilla, Paladins couldn't really tank. Blizzard hadn't provided enough on-demand damage abilities or other tools Paladins needed to tank. And among the tools that were missing was something to help a Paladin tank regenerate mana. At the time, a passive talent that regenerated mana wasn't something they were able or willing to provide. So instead, they added this as a passive that all Paladins got. When someone else heals the Paladin regenerates mana. Now, Protection Paladins these days have a passive that gives them plenty of mana regeneration, so this isn't that. But it is something that happens when you get healed. Protection gets a damage shield proportionate to the healing they receive, and for Holy, healing received gets echoed to the beaconed target and has illuminated healing applied to it. I guess I started running low on ideas this deep, but I know something like this would end up providing a lot of benefits to Protection. For Holy, it would only really be useful on fights with a lot of raid damage, or if Holy was casting Light of the Martyr a lot. Okay, maybe this idea is actually way better than I think it is. On to the buffs for Light of the Protector. The first one is Mirrored Light. Mirrored Light causes your heal to bounce to a nearby injured ally, copying the healing to 2 targets instead of just 1. This can be useful for massive self-healing and for healing an ally at the same time. While this doesn't in and of itself have any of Lightsmith's damage mitigation or damage absorption flavor, keep in mind that the Illuminated healing passive that all Lightsmiths have means that any healing is also at least a little bit of damage absorption mixed in. The other talent that buffs Light of the Protector is Eternal Glory. This brings back a heal over time for Paladins for the first time in a long while. I don't know why Blizzard hates the idea of giving Paladins a heal over time. Probably they think that heal over times are overdone with the other healing classes. And I have to admit, they're probably right. I mean, there's Renew, Renewing Mists, Rejuvenation, Regrowth, Wild Growth, Echo of Light, Dream Breath, Riptide, Reversion. I could go on. Doing things differently for paladins in general has its merits, but let's face it, Eternal Glory was awesome when it was around, and it would be awesome to bring it back. And having these talents, Mirrored Light and Eternal Glory, as mutually exclusive choices means that the player can choose between healing multiple targets and healing a single one. I think that's a pretty decent choice. So now we're in Tier 4, where the heavy stuff is supposed to be, and I really couldn't come up with much that was all that interesting. Well, not at first, anyway. I used to have Divinity at Tier 3 and Spiritual Attunement at Tier 4, but I swapped them when I realized how unnuanced and powerful Divinity could be. I'll start talking about Divinity. This is a talent that got introduced in Wrath of the Lich King and stuck around until Mists of Pandaria changed from talent trees to talent grids. I'm a bit surprised Divinity didn't come back in Dragonflight, to be honest. They added Divinity when they dropped Blessing of Kings down to a trainable ability in Wrath of the Lich King. It was a real battle of wills between the devs and the gamers to make that happen. And it's a very straightforward talent. It increases the healing you receive and the healing you dish out. It's very fitting for a protection/holy tree. Not much nuance to it, but not every talent here needs that much nuance. Just plain big and powerful talents belong in the hero trees. In the center, we've got Devoted Protector. Yes, this is the old Devotion Aura icon from all the way back in Warcraft 3. Yes, Devotion Aura wasn't always its shield, it was once a glove. I'm surprised and dismayed that this icon never got used for paladins in World of Warcraft at all, even though the icon is very much in World of Warcraft's game files. What I'm using it for is actually the first of a few of what I call off-specking talents. It dawned on me at one point, wouldn't it be nice if a Holy Paladin going into Lightsmith could use the talents to off-tank? And wouldn't it be nice if a Protection Paladin going into Lightsmith could use the talents to off-heal? Well, that's what this talent does. If you're holy, your mastery increases your block chance, you become uncrittable, and your critical strike chance is applied to your parry chance. For protection, your mastery boosts your healing, your mana pool, and your mana regeneration are massively increased. Some part of me is saying, hey, why wouldn't a tank plain and simple take this talent for self-healing? Well, maybe they would. I wonder if I should add a caveat that the mastery only helps when it comes to healing others. Next we have Judgment of the Protector. I would like to say that this shield, totally awesome. I had to include it somewhere. Now in my first video, my proto-draft had an upgrade to Judgment that honestly was just meant to pull in the Crusader's Smite ability from Diablo 3. Again, pulling in Diablo 3 abilities isn't a good goal in and of itself. The abilities that enter into a Paladin's kit or any other World of Warcraft class's kit should be what work with the kit and make World of Warcraft fun. Different games in different genres will be built differently, and their abilities will be built differently, so pulling those abilities in wasn't a wise goal in and of itself. That said, if a Diablo 3 ability does work, then it can be worth bringing in. Shield Glare and Phalanx are examples of that. But I digress. What I did to the Crusader's Smite ability to give it Lightsmith flavor was I renamed it to Chains of Light since the name Smite was taken, and I set it up so that allies near the targets of your Chains of Light spell receive Absorb Shields. I did that again here, albeit with a passive talent that buffs Judgment instead of a new active ability to replace Judgment. Though I'm starting to wonder if this is creating too many Absorb Shields. I mean, you get Absorb Shields from self-healing thanks to Illuminated Healing, you get Absorb Shields from Spiritual Attunement, you get Absorb Shields from this. Then again, you might not have all those talents. Awesome as all these talents are, you're not going to be able to grab all of them. On that note, I might as well say this here. I have a lot of interconnectedness in this talent tree because I want there to be a lot of flexibility. But when I look at this, I realize that a Lightsmith who takes the Light of the Protector talents and also wants to grab Divinity would be required to get either the Shield Glare talents or Spiritual Attunement to get Divinity. So maybe it's better if, instead of having all these arrows, we instead have a more vanilla-ish threshold system. If you spent enough points in the tree, you can enter the next tier. Vanilla actually had very few prerequisite talents in its talent trees and instead just have thresholds as a matter of course. I think these trees would benefit from the similar flexibility, but in any case, on to Tier 5. Phalanx. Again, I ended up picking this talent simply because it was a Diablo 3 cooldown, and I thought it was cool, but on reflection, it really is awesome to summon some angels who A, knock enemies back, and B, either heal or mitigate damage for your allies, depending on whether you're holy or protection. There's again not much nuance to this ability, but it is cool and worth looking into. I ended up taking the Prayer of Shadow Protection icon and recoloring it yellow for this. A lot like how I took the old Spell Warding icon and recolored it for Shield Glare. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how Lightsmith's first draft turned out. I feel like it would be the default protection tree and maybe even the default holy tree, if it were implemented as is. And it's not surprising. Protection paladins have a lot of self-healing to the point where when I run with them, I feel like I'm almost unneeded as a healer. So buffing heals and adding damage shields for healing pretty much are all you need to do to make this awesome for protection, and that's also enough to make it awesome for holy. Though Herald will be better for soloing, that's for sure. Come to think of it, Templar is also going to be awesome for soloing for protection, and even though I play neither protection nor retribution, that is the tree I'm going to do in my next video. May the light have mercy on my ignorant soul.